Hey, aloha everyone. Michelle Melendez with Blossom Inner Wellness and StandTogetherHawaii.com. And this is also on the Voice of Kona Radio, 100.5 FM. Mahalo so much for listening on the islands and for watching these channels on this show. So I get to interview today James Roguski, and he has been studying the WHO and World Health Organization, and he's also understands what is going on. So if you're going, okay, I know something's off with this world, we have some answers for you that are probably going to shock you. And what I love most of all is actions. What can we take? For those of you who know this channel, I've been standing up for Maui, standing up for the attack on Maui and what has been going down here on the islands. And if you haven't yet, please join StandTogetherHawaii.com, because I do give action steps for what we can take here locally on the islands. James, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. There's a lot of things that people can do, but in all sincerity, step number one is to understand and comprehend what the heck it is that we're talking about. And so I've been reporting on this for over 2 years. I'm deep down the rabbit hole. I've been reading all kinds of boring WHO documents and watching their boring meetings until you
Mhm.
get to the point where you go, oh, wait a minute, what is that? And so I think I can help sort out a lot of misinformation, because all of these many documents and meetings and different versions of this and that, and everyone else's interpretation of them um, has put a lot of misinformation out there. So on one level, if this is the first that you've heard about the World Health Organization and their attempts to negotiate an international agreement, a new one, and
Mhm.
amendments to an existing international health regulations, in many ways, count your blessings if this is brandy new to you, because you just have to learn the current version of what's been changing. The sands have been shifting over the past year and a half or so. And it's good to know how we got here, but we're here now. And erase the blackboard of your mind if you've learned about some of this before, and start fresh and understand step number one is awareness and clarity on what is going on. And then step number two, at the beginning of this video, I'll make it really easy. When you're done watching this video, if this all seemed to make sense to you, just share the daylights out of this. And that doesn't mean, oh, I posted it on Facebook and the algorithm's going to spread it out to all my friends. Sharing information is more, get out your phone and start with A and send it to, Anna and Bob and Carol and Doug and all the way down to Z. And then go into your email account and share this video with everybody via email, and then direct message, whatever social media, followers or friends or things you might have. Then call them all up and go, hey, did you see this information? What's your opinion about it? And don't get into an argument about it. If they think that this is important, all they need to do is the same thing. Tell all your friends. Make it go across the islands, in a heartbeat. You tell somebody, they tell somebody, they tell somebody. Pretty soon, everybody knows what's going on. Then you
Mhm.
can decide what actions are appropriate, but you can do it in mass because you've identified who your allies are.
Absolutely. Thank you for that so much. And we do need, each one of us, if you're listening to the sound of my voice or watching this video, we have to know what's going on. We can't just ignore things and act like our life is going on as normal, because it will not be normal very long if we don't do anything about it. So I do. Oh, go ahead, James.
One thing you said, a trigger word for me, because I pronounce a certain word in the English language a little bit differently than everybody else. When people don't care about something, they're ignorant of it. It's not ignorance, it's ignorance. And so a lot of people have everything going on in their life, and some people are going to
Mhm.
go, I just can't handle it. It's too much. Okay, fine. It's not the right time for them to apply their energies, to whatever it is we may be talking about. There's a difference between not sharing the information and inhibiting their awareness of it. If you don't share this video, that actually means you're censoring it. Send it to everybody you could possibly imagine sending it to. If they choose to be ignorant, of the information. It's free, it's their free will.
Mhm.
Find the people who are willing and work with them. You'll get way more done than if you try to push this onto somebody who just doesn't have the capacity to deal with it.
Mahalo for that. Thank you so much. So let's just start with who is the who. Start
Well,
there.
the W, it gets into an Abbott and Costello routine, who's on first, all that kind of stuff. They were founded back in the 1940s. The United States got signed in with not a 2/3 consent of the Senate, so it's not really properly ratified in that fashion. Uh, Congress passed a joint resolution. President Harry Truman signed in on June 14th, 1948. So 75 plus years. And there are aspects in that original piece of legislation from Congress that is very, very interesting. Number one, they said nothing that the WHO ever says would require the United States to pass any kind of law or legislation. Happy to help out. Think back to 1948 after World War II, the world was kind of a mess, right? So happy to help out to improve the health of the world. We'll donate whatever we can, but you can't tell us what to do. And it also said in there that if we ever wanted to leave, we would promise to give 1 year's notice. We would pay whatever amount of money we promised we would pay, but we're just out of there with a letter. And so, one of the things that I've been a proponent of is HR 79, which is a resolution put forth by Representative Andy Biggs in Arizona. It's a 3-paragraph piece of legislation that would essentially give notice, stop giving them money, and say, hey, we're out of here. At the moment, we've gotten over 50 members of Congress to sign on to that as co-sponsors. What we're looking to do is find one senator who will copy that and submit it into the Senate as companion legislation. And so it really comes down to, even in the best of relationships, when the relationship has gone sour, sometimes you just have to leave. And
Yeah.
that's where it seems that we are with the World Health Organization. Uh, what really, I think, turned it very much upside down is about 20, 25 years ago, the nations didn't want to give the WHO any more money because they weren't really happy with what they were doing. And so they started accepting donations. And over the last couple of decades, they've essentially been doing the bidding of their donors. And the song, or the saying, he who pays the piper calls the tune. So
Hmm.
whoever is giving them money puts strings on that money to have them
Yeah.
do what is wanted. And that's just made everything go off the rails. Absolutely off the rails.
Absolutely. So what are we seeing today that is so concerning, and why people need to be waking up and smelling the coffee, as you would say, we would say?
Um, it's a complicated story, and I'll try to start where we are at the moment. Um, People can go to exitthewho.org and get the big long story and many, 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 many things to do. So I won't give all of the background. You can see that on exitthewho.org. So where we are right now is the WHO is responsible, World Health Organization, which is the bureaucracy of this entity. In 2022, they had 8,851 employees. They spent $1 billion on salaries, and the average income was $120,000. So first and
Wow.
foremost, the WHO is a bureaucracy that the people there make a good living, and they like to keep that going. Okay, so they're busy trying to raise $7 billion for their next 4-year plan, 2025, 6, 7, and 8. And so separate from that is something called the World Health Assembly. You can think like your state assembly, a legislative body type thing. Each nation that is a member, there are 194 member nations, send a delegate to a
Mhm.
meeting in May once a year. And like any other legislative body, they deliberate over whatever types of resolutions they're going to adopt. But this meeting is set to potentially adopt a new international agreement, which many people call the Pandemic Treaty. And it's also looking to consider amendments to an existing agreement called the International Health Regulations. So step number one is to understand there's two parts to the WHO. The WHO is the bureaucracy, and the WHA, or World Health Assembly, is supposed to be the governing body of the bureaucracy. So it's supposed to be that the member nations all get together and tell the bureaucracy what to do. But more and more and more, they only meet once a year, and the bureaucrats have more and more money, more and more, they're there 24/7. And so the just like every other aspect of our government, the legislative bodies tend to put everything over to the executive branch, and we, the people, lose our say. Challenge most people in the world to identify, well, who represented you at the WHO's meeting last year?
Mm-hmm.
Did they ask you for your advice? Did they, did you vote for them? Did you choose them? Well, in the United States, our chief delegate is the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Javier Becerra. And here's where it gets interesting. He was interviewed almost a year ago now in Aspen, Colorado. And the interviewer asked him, well, what would you like Americans to know about the department that he runs, the Health and Human Services? And the first thing he said was that, oh, Americans need to know that the federal government does not have any authority over healthcare. They have a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
and that gives them a lot of power, but no legal authority. And people need to
Well,
remember that.
yeah,
And so,
I was just, yeah, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, like the federal, there's a lot of foreign, like the United States is a corporation. It's not even a government anymore, and the feds, it's foreign corporations, people that run the government, and people need to know that too. And this is a huge deal. So keep going, James. Thank you for that. That's
So
crazy.
when you let that sink in, I mean, that actually feels correct, but yet everybody ignores it, right? You have control over your own healthcare, even though many people say a lot of things, because when school systems, I'll just use an example, maybe people are aware of this. When school systems over the past 4 years forced students to wear masks or get jabs or whatever it may have been, um, many people came to realize that that wasn't lawfully done. That was influenced by money that was, promised to the school systems, and the
That's
requirement to
correct.
get the money was to have these, meet certain guidelines and have certain rules. So what we're dealing with here is in many ways outside of the law. Now,
And that's actually happened in Orange County when Peggy Hall was,
Mhm.
they were fighting against their legislative body, and they literally said, one of the members actually literally said, well, if we stop these mandates, we won't get the money. And
Exactly.
that is fraud. That's fraud, ladies and gentlemen. That is not government policy. That's fraud.
So what I
And
want
yeah, go
everyone
ahead.
to understand out of the gate is we're not really talking about law in which the WHO is going to have some legal authority over your governor or your assembly or your health department or whatever. The way they have this set up is clearly explained by a CDC final ruling that was put into the Federal Register on, I'll let this one stew for a moment and then I'll give you the answer. It was submitted on January 19th, 2017. Now, the ruling was about quarantines and emergencies and all that. And one of the aspects in there defined the requirements for our Secretary of Health and Human Services to declare that the United States had a public health emergency. And it was tied to, well, if the Director General of the WHO declares what they call a public health emergency of international concern, PHEIC, I kid you not, a fake. If the Director General of the WHO declares that there's a fake, that's all that's needed for our Secretary of Health and Human Services to declare a public health emergency. Now, that's not a command, it's not an order. It enables actions that don't have really any basis in reality. Just because he said so, somebody else can say so. And then maybe your state or your county or your city says, oh, well, our Secretary of Health and Human Services said there's a problem, so we say there's a problem. Well, where's the actual problem?
And
And
evidence. Yeah.
okay, so the starting point is to understand the way hypnosis works. I often call the WHO the World Hypnosis Organization
That's
because
perfect.
they give advice, but people hear, oh, they said so, so we have to. No, you don't. You have
That's
to stand
correct.
up. You have to stand up for your own rights against people who would like to take them away. And so what happened back in 2022, when I first started paying attention to this, was the Biden administration had submitted amendments to the international health regulations, which go all the way back to 1969. And it was a strange set of events. I'll let people go to the website and get all of the details on it. But ultimately, what happened was they claimed to have adopted amendments to the international health regulations on May 28th, 2022, but they never actually voted. They said they did, but you can watch the meeting, and they never even talked about it. But they published a document that said it was authenticated, circulated it all around the world. And so for almost 2 years now, I've been trying to say, hey, that isn't official. They're just punking everybody, right? It's like, see what you can get away with, submit
Yeah.
changes and say that you voted on them, but never bother to vote and see if anybody's paying attention. It's astonishing to me that for almost 2 years, trying to raise awareness of this, you would think that that would be a scandal. And
Yeah.
we did manage in November of 2023 to get Rob Roos, who's a member of the European Parliament from the Netherlands, along with 11 other members, to send a letter to Tedros, the Director General, saying, hey, can't find any record of a vote. These things are null and void. Do you have any evidence that there was a vote? And since November 28th, almost, I guess, 4 months now, silence, right? So what we're dealing with here is an organization that doesn't really seem to care about following its own rules. Now, there's a batch of amendments that you can learn about on rejecttheamendments.com that are
Okay.
currently being considered. Now, for me, I've been paying attention to this since they became public in December of 2022. So certainly more than a year. What they want to do is add changes to Articles 24 and 27. And I'll just read some of the terminology, okay? They have a term that is like the official that would be at a port or an airport or or a cruise line might come in, and it says this is only two words being added to the existing Article 27. So it says the competent authority may implement additional health measures, including isolation, and they would add and quarantine of the conveyances as necessary to prevent the spread of disease. Well, a conveyance, look in their definition, is an aircraft, a ship, a train, a bus, a vehicle of some kind. And so the conveyance operators, the cruise line, the airline, whatever travel might be, would be responsible for ensuring that everybody on board was all fine and healthy and passed some kind of a test, or had a vaccination certificate. So they want to add something to Article 24, which essentially says that um, conveyance operators would comply with the health measures, and then they want to add, which may include isolation and quarantine for application on board as well as during embarkation and disembarkation, getting on and off the boat.
Yeah.
Such measures, including isolation and quarantine, shall be based on available evidence. Well, boy, that's a little bit vague. All right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that, amongst many others that they're doing with these amendments is to make it so that people who are traveling might be in for a really big surprise. You think you're
Hmm.
headed to your vacation, but if you had to be tested when you get off to go through customs or wherever it might be, now you got please realize this is for international travel. That your vacation or your business trip or your visit, to family or whatever, um, could take a really serious turn for the worst,
Yeah.
just based on you did not accept their emergency use vaccine, because that's one of the other things they want the WHO to be in charge of approving quote unquote vaccines, um, or whatever test they might deem, to be the available evidence. If it goes the wrong way, boom, you're in quarantine. And
Hmm.
and so um, this is a very sneaky little piece buried in a large document that people need to pay attention to. Now, let me shift gears
Yeah, and I
because
just want to say that, that's a big one, you guys. That's a really, really big one. I do want to go to the Who, exitthewho.org. I'm going to share that video, that page really fast. And also, I do want to do a quick shout out to the sponsor of this channel, but this is here with the exitthewho.com and then,
oh,
wait, exitthewho.org.
no, you found yourself somehow on the wrong spot. You must have a cached version. That's an old version. If you scroll down a little tiny bit, you might be able to see where it says click here to go back up.
Here,
No,
click
you're
here,
too far down. Um, Boy,
click here.
you've got a cached version there. So just go click on my
Okay,
name at the top. Oh, I meant the other name, but up at the very, very top. Yeah, just click on my name at the very, very top there. Yeah, that should,
I'll go back here.
yeah, go
Well,
back.
exitthewho.org is his website, exitthewho.org, and I'll just do
Okay.
this
Yeah,
here.
click on my name at the very,
Should
very
be coming
top.
up. And we're having some technical difficulties here. Quick shout out to the sponsor of this channel, who is, I see,
There you go.
who is Ace of Coins, aceofcoins.com.
Yeah.
If you want to
Quick.
learn more about how to lawfully get rid of taxes, and also license your biometric data that's being used, please check out aceofcoins.com. They do support this channel. Mahalo so much. Okay,
Right
James.
below
So
that,
we're
right below where it says type your email, you should be able to say no thanks and just go read everything. I don't put anything behind a paywall. So exitthewho.org is the second one down.
okay, right here.
There you go. Got out of work for you.
Exitthewho.org, everyone, for more information on this. This is really vital. When I first heard about the WHO being able to tell countries that there's a pandemic and that the country has to comply to that because of this treaty, the pandemic treaty, this should be scaring the bejesus out of everybody.
Okay, so
Go ahead, James.
this particular article is an absolute monster. It is a resource for people who want to take action. I'll keep talking and you can keep scrolling. There's just
Okay.
an enormous amount of information here. I've tried to summarize it at the very top. If you watch these two first couple of videos, you'll get to see what's going on with the regulations, which is what we just talked about, and also what I'm about to talk about,
Oh,
which is the treaty. Yeah, those two videos right there.
okay.
So um,
So again, you guys, this is exitthewho.org if you're listening online or on the
so
radio.
give it a quick, really fast scroll because this is a bottomless pit of things that you can do. Step number one is to understand what the heck is going on. So watch some of the videos, see what's really going on. Understand that there are two separate things. There are amendments and there's a treaty being negotiated. So two very, very separate things. But I've also communicated this information to people in dozens of nations around the world. So if you really scroll halfway down the page, oh, I think you're going to get sidetracked there. If you scroll halfway down the page, you'll see, maybe pull your slider there and just go all the way halfway down.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. There you go. There's people all around the world who are pushing back against what is going on with the WHO. I think you had a flash there for a moment. So in Australia, I've been working with a group for over a year. Australia exits the WHO. And if you scroll down, you'll see that alphabetically, whether it's,
Oh, yeah.
Bulgaria or Canada or Chile or China, all over the world, Japan, so forth and so on. There's just people are aware of what the WHO is working to do. And so leave that for people to explore.
Wow.
One of the things
Okay.
that I do all the time is I give people my phone number. And so I'll give you a minute to get a pen and a paper, but it's on every article that I've ever written. I'm in California, so you can call me at 310-619-3055. If you have any questions, all the information's there. But let me now go to the second aspect of what is going on here. Because if you thought if the quarantine and the declarations of emergencies for no real good reason and all of that were problems with the amendments, what they're working to agree on, and they're literally meeting this week and next week. I got up early this morning and I have to finish watching their meeting in Geneva. They're not having a good time. They're disagreeing amongst themselves. So I'm very
Thank
optimistic that
God.
it's going to fall apart. But here's the insanity of what they're working to do. And you can find this information on stopthetreaty.org.
Okay.
Stopthetreaty.org. What they want to do is absolutely insane. So I'm not going to try to make sense of it, but I will be able to explain what it is they want to do. They want to have a new agreement that is more properly called a framework convention. Now, all you really have to think about is the 1992 Framework Convention on Climate Change. What that means is that a group of unelected bureaucrats will meet every year as a conference of the parties, have a party, go to some wonderful location, all get together, decide the fate of the world. And because our nation in 1992, the Senate did give 2/3 consent, all of the 193 nations in the United Nations are part of the Framework Convention for Climate Change. And so year after year after year, the stupidest ideas you could imagine are decided upon by people that you don't have the foggiest idea who they are, but yet you have to do what they've
What they
determined
say.
needs to be done. If you like that idea, then you'll probably love the Framework Convention for Pandemic Prevention, Preparedness, and Response. And if you're invested in some of the market sectors that they're going to be throwing money at, then you'll probably really like it. Other than that, it's the craziest thing going. So what they want to do is something called the One Health approach. They believe that, you have to watch out when you're dealing with animals because, a disease might jump species and cause the next
Ouch.
pandemic. They want everyone to believe that somebody ate some bat soup in a Wuhan wet market, not what maybe, might have actually happened, because it certainly wasn't that. And so they want to spend up to $30 billion a year to have what they call the One Health approach, to go looking for pathogens in every imaginable place, your local bat cave. It could be at your veterinarian's office when you take your pet in and they give a stool sample. They're literally, the CDC is surveilling wastewater plants. They're surveilling the black water that comes out of the bathrooms from international airplane flights. If it's your chicken coop or your pigsty or wherever else they might find a pathogen, They would then bring it into what they want to put together, which is a WHO coordinated laboratory network. Now, think Wuhan Institute of Virology. They want to build out a worldwide network to be looking for pathogens, bringing them into the lab, because the new gold rush is the digital data that is a genetic sequence of whatever the RNA or the DNA of said pathogen might be. If you go back to 2020, and there was a data file that was given from China that claimed to be the Wuhan Institute of Virology 1 virus. Regardless of what you believe about viruses and the terrain theory or any of that sort of stuff, it's undeniable that they presented a data file that said, oh, well, here's the genome. Well, they changed the name real quick to SARS-CoV-2 because that was very incriminating, calling it WIV1. But think about how many hundreds of billions of dollars that data file was worth. Fast forward to when South Africa and Botswana found Omicron, or whatever they put in their data file. Well, they handed that over to the world. And if the international health regulations were followed properly, the other nations should have said, well, thank you for your transparency. Appreciate your, sharing that information. But that's not what happened. They were greeted with travel restrictions that hurt their economy. And the real kick in the pants was that Pfizer and Moderna took that data file, put it into the booster, and made a couple of more $1 billion. So the argument in these negotiations right now that they're still haggling over is the smaller nations of the world, the less wealthy nations, said in their initial proposals, we're not giving you any more pathogen data unless you promise to share the profits. So they call that the pathogen access and benefit sharing system. The large pharmaceutical companies want to force all of the nations to hand over their pathogen data. Go look at, you have to go looking for data and send everything to the central biohub, and maybe we'll give you some share of the profit. So what we're dealing with here is not good versus evil. We're dealing with large greed with, smaller greed from other nations trying to get a piece of the pie. They want a piece of
because
the
it's all
profit.
fraud. It's all fraud.
It's all fraud. And so the next piece of that puzzle is the WHO would be then put in charge of a global distribution and logistics network. They have in Dubai a 20,000 square meter distribution hub. That's 4 football fields. So imagine you're a member of the Conference of the Parties, and all of the relevant stakeholders, all of the foundations and organizations and corporations and whatever, y'all show up to the yearly meeting and you've got a pot of $30 billion. Well, what kind of products do we buy from you? And what kind of products do we buy from you? And what kind of products do we buy from you to put them in the distribution hub? Well, wait a minute. You can't just fill up the distribution hub and let it sit there forever. You got to rotate your product. And so you need an emergency here and an emergency there. So you pull something out of this storage depot and deal with whatever you claim is happening wherever there's a new alert, and rotate your stock, and the contracts keep flowing. And so what you're looking at, in my view, I've dubbed it the new OPEC. If you're familiar with the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, Saudi Arabia and so forth. This is the Organization of Pandemic Emergency Corporations. They just want to work out.
Wait, say that one more time. Say that one more time. You guys listen to what he just said.
It's not a thing. This is just my way of explaining.
Yes, I know. It's not a thing, but it is a thing coming because this is crazy. Go ahead, James.
It's the Organization of pandemic emergency corporations. Now, I have a little bit of an advantage because in November of 2022, I was already deeply, for more than half a year, paying attention to this. And I was waiting to trying to get a hold of the amendments that were being discussed. And I watched the Indonesian health minister present to the business leaders in November of 2022 at the B20 meeting in Bali, Indonesia. And he said two separate things. One is what we talked about first, and one is what we're talking about now. The first thing he said, which was just filled with lies, he said, well, in early 2020, we had to lock down the world. Like, no, you didn't have to. Okay. Then he said, well, that hurt the economy. Well, it hurt mom and pop. It didn't really hurt the big stores. Okay.
That's true.
Then he went on to say that they were very happy that they were submitted these amendments that he knew about, but were still secret, that would amend the international health regulations so that if you're properly tested or properly vaccinated, then you would be able to travel. Well, hold on just one moment. The so-called vaccines don't stop infection. They don't stop transmission. They cause immune dysfunction, disease, disability, and death. The testing is bogus. How do you get tested and be told that you have an asymptomatic disease? That's just doesn't make any sense at all. So really what they were setting up is if you get tested or jabbed according to their criteria, you've certified that you're compliant. And if you're compliant, they'll cut you slack and let you travel. And you're going to suffer because of it for health reasons if you allow yourself to be injected with something that they say is approved for emergency use if you want to travel here or travel there or travel someplace else. So that was the first thing that he said that applies to the amendments. Then he was talking about something that is very much a parallel to what I just described about looking for pathogens, bringing them into the lab, and then distributing all the products. He knew in November of 2022 something that was also going to be released in December of 2022, which was the United States Defense Department had pledged $5 billion over the next 5 years to start building out just such a network. I published an article on my Substack back 2 years ago about the 36 laboratories, biolabs in the Ukraine that were funded by the United States Defense Department. If you didn't know about that, it's old news. Go check it out. And so the US Defense Department is working with the World Bank to have what they call the Pandemic Fund. And what they're doing is taking our tax money along with a handful of other nations to build out biolabs all around the world to go looking for pathogens to bring into the lab under what they call the global health security agenda. Well, it sure looks an awful lot like biological weapons research, development, and proliferation to me. And so when the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, was passed in December of 2022, signed by Biden, we're already in that business, meaning the United States Defense Department. Well, the WHO's got fund envy. They went in on the game. And so the pandemic treaty is essentially the pandemic fund on steroids. If they can get $30 billion a year, they want to essentially control the distribution of products that would enable the OPEC companies, the Organization of Pandemic Emergency Corporations, to profiteer from whatever disease they might find. Now, when I talk to folks that I know in Australia, I joke that they don't have to worry about disease X. They're going to have to worry about disease K because maybe it's going to come from a koala or a kangaroo or something like that. They might find some, bacteria that lives in the volcano or off the coast or whatever they can do to find something to scare people with triggers the money-making thing. If you went to a business school or maybe appeared on Shark Tank, where you
Yeah.
present an entrepreneurial idea to see if it, makes sense for people to invest in. If 5 years ago you said, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put a digital sequence in a computer file. Don't really need a pathogen. We'll just put a in silico data, tell everybody that it's a deadly pathogen, scare the bejeebers out of them, stick that into some lipid nanoparticle along with a bunch of other junk, and convince people that if they inject that into their arm, they'll be protected from this mysterious virus. And will convince nations around the world to shut down their economy, waiting for the jab, and and put billions of dollars into the hands of our companies, and we'll make these jabs and distribute them to people. The jabs don't necessarily work, but don't worry about that. Everybody will believe that they do. Um, that's our business plan. Do you think you could have convinced somebody that you would be able to get that to work? It's absurd, but hold on a minute.
It's
That's what
working.
happened. That's what happened.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
the little bit of the problems that they had were things like, well, the poorer nations of the world didn't have enough money to buy the jabs.
Oh
So,
man.
so let's now, with this pandemic fund and the WHO's funding, they literally call it the mechanism. That's what they call their funding mechanism, the mechanism. Okay. Let's get poor people in wealthy nations to pay taxes or go into debt. Let's put that into a fund that's controlled by a bunch of cronies in the conference of the parties, have them distribute the contracts to oligarchs in poor nations. So let's take money from poor people in rich nations, give it to rich people in poor nations, and say that by building out this infrastructure as part of the pharmaceutical hospital emergency industrial complex, that we're going to be preventing the next pandemic. Sure seems to me like it would be more likely to cause the next problem and profit
Mhm.
from it. Well, this
Because
is what they
it
are
was very profitable.
this is what they are touting as the pandemic treaty. It's
Wow.
crazy unless you're super greedy and
Hmm.
you've got a seat at the table and you stand to get a piece of the pie.
A
Then it's
huge
just
piece.
then it's just evil and greedy. Okay. From a health perspective, it doesn't make any sense at all, but they're not talking about health. They're
Hmm.
essentially settling a trade dispute. And for anybody who says, oh, that's unconstitutional, get out your pocket constitution, look up Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. That's the Commerce Clause. And our founding fathers, when the states put together the Constitution and handed over 18 enumerated authorities to the federal government, that Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, says that the federal government has the authority to regulate international commerce with foreign nations. They're just doing a business deal. And
It's just business.
you're not going to get a piece of the pie. They're going to take your tax dollars or put us deeper into debt, more likely, hand that money
Yeah.
into a big fund that a bunch of people that you don't know and don't have any say over are going to distribute contracts to fill up warehouses full of pandemic related products, that the sooner they can say there's an emergency somewhere and rotate their products through and get new production, um, it will be profitable for some, deadly for many, all paid for by we the people. Now, if you
So
think
this
that's a
is
great
a
idea, then
no,
support the pandemic treaty.
not at all.
Okay. If you think
Yeah,
that's
that's
crazy,
what's on the table, you guys. So James, what can people do? What's some actions? I'm always about what is one thing that if you're listening on the radio or if you're watching this, what is
step
one thing? One is go to exitthewho.org, which is your website, and start learning more about this because this will be affecting you and your family. So don't be ignorant of this issue here. It's very, very crucial, especially if you want your children to live in a free world without being jabbed in the arm. So
step
what is
number
one thing
one,
that people can do?
step number one is really very simple. Okay. Take this video, and I think I said this at the beginning of our discussion.
Yeah.
take this video and share it like you've never shared anything ever. And I don't mean just post it on Twitter, post it on Facebook and walk away and say, ooh, I did it. Okay. No, it's like everybody you could
Send it.
possibly imagine. If you think about it in a slightly different way, if there's someone that you have contact information with and you don't send it to them, either by text message or email or by whatever other means, you're effectively acting as a censor because you're not going to hear this on the mainstream media. You're not going to
No,
hear
they
this.
won't say this.
You're,
Not at
you're
all.
not going to you're not going to hear this on the alternative media. Okay, they've been silent about much of this. Send it to, let's just say you're talking to Carol, right? Send it to Carol, send her a text message, send her an email, send her a direct message, give her a phone call, leave a voice message, call her up, get her on the phone, hey, Carol, I hope you're doing okay. I sent you something a whole
Watch
bunch of
this.
different ways. Just watch it, okay?
So people start to understand, because that's the first part is awareness.
Don't try to push it. Don't try to explain it. You don't need to be the expert. Just let them listen to this. They can get all the information they want. There will be a certain percentage of the population who come back and they go, oh my God, I had no idea that this was going on. What should they do?
Thank you
Same
for
thing.
sending it. Yeah.
Same
Send it out.
thing. Send it out to everybody you know. On exitthewho.org, there are 15 categories of actions that you can take. But step number one is to identify your allies because one person isn't going to do much. Imagine if you wanted to reach out to some politician, congressperson, senator, whatever it might be. If you've got one person and you make a phone call, that's great. By all means, do that. There are 20 automated emails sending things
Yes.
that various groups have put together. If you put your zip code in and you find this on exitthewho.org, you can go and send 20 emails a day just by pushing a couple of buttons on your computer. But what if you had 300 people doing that? Okay. This is something that we actually did, not me, I'm not saying I take credit for it. We the people about a decade ago, Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, started negotiations, and then Obama ultimately signed us into the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And it was pretty much a done deal. And then we learned what was in it because they kept it totally secret.
Yeah.
And we wiped it out just because people took the time to learn what is in there. So if you go to either of the many sites that we've been talking about, I did a 10-minute summary of the amendments in great detail, which is on rejecttheamendments.com. I did a 14-minute summary of the quote unquote treaty/framework convention on stopthetreaty.org. Those are both right at the top of exitthewho.org.
Yep.
Watch those videos, understand what they're doing, spread the word. There's many, 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 many things that you can do. But it all starts with just being aware that this is what's really going on. So for me personally, please don't believe a word I'm saying. Go
Look it up.
verify, that the documents are what I claim them to be. And then if you really want to do something, get out your phone, get out your camera or your laptop or whatever you might do to record yourself. Take your camera and print out any piece of the document that you think is something that you don't like, videotape it so that they cannot say that you're spreading misinformation. What I've been
Yeah.
doing for 2 years is I've been reading their documents and shining light on what they say they're doing. Then express your opinion, whatever your opinion may be. And you can see a couple of hundred versions of that on another one of my articles, which you can find on screwthewho.com. So
I love it.
if you go to screwthewho.com, you'll see what several hundred people have said. There's more people saying stuff every day. If you're silent, that's viewed as consent.
As consent,
So
you guys. We
speak
have
up,
to step up. Yes, absolutely. James, thank you so much for this information. I always do a quick prayer at the end because we do need a divine miracle. So mahalo so much for watching, you guys. StandTogetherHawaii.com if you have not joined our email list, because we are taking actions against things that are happening on the islands. We do have a 2040 agenda plan for the Big Island, which I've been told, and I haven't looked at it. I'm going to be looking at it today, that has a possibility of a nuclear power plant coming to the Big Island that they want to bring. This stuff is crucial that we stand together. So standtogetherhawaii.com. If you have not joined that email list, please go there. James, mahalo. Let's do a quick prayer. Infinite intelligence of all things, we just know you are really running the show here, and this is a game we came to play, and it's a game of courage. It's a game of growth, of spiritual growth. And we just ask right now, we just are so grateful for the courage every one of us has to speak the truth. And we just send James right now so much amazing abundance and support, and that he knows he is absolutely loved beyond measure, and that he is so on the right track, and so much gratitude for his kuleana, for him doing what is his to do to bring light to this, to the awareness of what these government leaders, these leaders who think they are leaders and that they control us. But we just know, Great Spirit, that you really are in control, and you are waking up the masses, that each one of us knows what is ours to do. And even if that's just sharing this video, talking about it with a friend, going to the website exitthewho.org, and just diving into what is coming into this world, so that we can actually turn the boat. In a huge ship that's going on the sea only needs just a fraction of a turn to go on to a completely different area of the world. And Great Spirit, we know that that is happening. Thank you so much for all of the light beings. We send so much peace and inner strength to all people right now. And if anybody needs a little spark of hope, that they have it right in this present moment. Mahalo so much, Great Spirit. And so it is. James, so much mahalo for you for joining us. This is amazing, and I'm so grateful for all the work you've done, because that is a ton of work, and we've got this. It's going to be okay. We've got this. So thank you so much for what you've been doing.
Thank you very much for having me.